Hey, I'm Cleo. I'm a longtime tutor and I'm a test prep expert here with study.com. So today we're going to be talking about the Praxis Core Reading exam, which is test code 5713. And specifically, we're going to be focusing on the questions that have to do with comparing two passages. So it's called Integration of Knowledge and Text, specifically analysis and comparison of texts. So we have three sample problems based on two passages, and you can check them out now. Okay, so we're going to dive into these sample problems involving comparing two passages. So I'm going to go ahead and read these out loud. Passage 1, an enclave of tranquility amidst the hustle and bustle of a city. Urban parks are a man-made oasis. These green spaces, often overlooked, are the result of careful planning and design. They provide a refuge for city dwellers and a habitat for urban wildlife. Over time, these parks can develop unique ecosystems, adapting to the urban environment and evolving independently from their rural counterparts. Parks can become so specific to their environment that species found within them may vary greatly from those in similar green spaces just a few miles away. In this way, urban parks serve as a microcosm of evolution in action. Okay, before I read the next one, I just want to check in my brain, what was that about? That's about how urban parks are an oasis in the middle of a city and they form unique ecosystems because they're cut off from the rest of nature. Okay, next one. Passage 2. In New York Central Park, a city within a city, an ecosystem thrives amidst the concrete jungle. Once part of a larger contiguous forest, the park was carved out in the mid-19th century and has since evolved into a unique habitat. The park's diverse range of flora and fauna, from tiny insects to large mammals, can be attributed to its isolated evolution. Researchers have started to study the impact of human interaction, introducing and removing certain elements on this encapsulated ecosystem. The responses from the park's inhabitants provide insights into the complex interplay of urban development and natural evolution. Okay, checking in our brain, what's that second one about? It's about Central Park specifically and how it has its own unique habitat and it lets people study how human interaction affects a habitat because they can introduce things and see what happens. Okay. So feel free to underline as you go, of course. I'm not going to tell you what to underline, but whatever seems important to you. Problem 1 says, which of the following point about ecosystems is mentioned in both passages? So one more mental check. It's always important to understand, how do these passages relate to each other? What's the overlap? What's the difference? So I'd say they're both about urban parks and how they're unique ecosystems, but the second one is specifically about Central Park. Okay, close enough. Now let's see the answers. A, ecosystems are often created through human intervention. Doesn't seem to be the point. I mean, it's a point, but is it created through? One of them was a forest that was carved out, so B, urban ecosystems are completely independent from rural ecosystems. They both seem to mention that, right? They both say they're unique ecosystems separate from everything else. C, human interaction can influence the evolution of an ecosystem. Absolutely, passage 2 says that. Passage 1 says, they help design the park, but it doesn't really it says, the parks can adapt to the urban environment, but it's not so much about human interaction. D, ecosystems are static and do not change over time. No, they definitely change. And E, ecosystems are only present in rural areas, not cities. No way, these are both about cities. I think the simplest overlap that they both have would be B, urban ecosystems are completely independent from rural ecosystems, because they're both commenting on how evolving in the cities, separated from everything else, really affects the way that the park develops. Okay, so best choice, B. So we have the same two passages, right? For problem 2, it says, which of the following statements best describes the relationship between the two passages? So just to check back in our minds again, so we know what we're looking for. Passage 1 was about the idea of urban parks in general. Passage 2 was specifically about Central Park, right? So, okay. Let's check the answers. A, passage 1 discusses the general concept of urban parks and their ecological significance, whereas passage 2 specifically examines the ecosystem of New York Central Park. That seems pretty on the money. I'm going to leave a mark there. B, passage 1 emphasizes the role of urban parks in providing a refuge for city dwellers, whereas passage 2 focuses on the impact of human interaction on the park's ecosystem. I mean, that is sort of true. I mean, the first half, it's not really just focusing on the refuge for city dwellers. It's a part of it. And anyway, I think A is still the more accurate way to describe the relationship. C, passage 1 describes how urban parks are carefully planned and designed, whereas passage 2 discusses how Central Park evolved from a larger contiguous forest. I mean, true, but is that the main relationship between them? No. D, passage 1 presents the idea that urban parks serve as a microcosm of evolution, whereas passage 2 argues that the park's ecosystem is a result of isolated evolution. I think those are sort of saying the same thing. I don't see a huge difference there, and it doesn't seem to be the main point. And the last one, E, passage 1 suggests that species in urban parks vary greatly from those in similar green spaces, whereas passage 2 shows that the park's diverse range of flora and fauna is due to its isolated evolution. Again, those things are true, but that's not like the main relationship between the passages. A is our best one for sure. It's the most straight ahead, and that's a great way to summarize the main difference between them. So for our third question here, it says, unlike the author of passage 2, the author of passage 1 is focused on what? As a prediction, I would say passage 1 talks a little bit more generally about where urban parks come from, or where they can come from at least. And it also talks a little bit more generally about the ways that their ecosystems can be different from those around them because they're isolated. Whereas passage 2 goes a bit more specifically into Central Park and the way that it interacts with the city. Okay, so A, discussing the role of human intervention in creating and maintaining urban parks. Yes, I mean, certainly creating, it talks about it more, since the second one came from a forest, but it still says the park was carved out, which takes human creation, and maintaining, it definitely talks about the ways that humans interact with it later on, so I don't know, B, providing a historical background of the creation of specific urban parks. No, one is not doing specifics. Exploring the impact of human interaction on the ecosystem of a specific park. Again, one is not doing that. D, examining the unique ecosystems that can develop in urban parks in general. Yes, it's saying, what's that line? It says, parks can become so specific to their environment that species found within them may vary greatly from those in similar green spaces just a few miles away. In this way, urban parks serve as a microcosm of evolution and action. So yeah, while 2 gives us an example of that in Central Park, 1 is just sort of setting up the fact that that can happen. So I think that's pretty good. And E, studying the specific flora and fauna in New York Central Park. No, 1 is not doing that. So while I think A is worth considering in terms of creating the park, human intervention is certainly mentioned in 2. So I think D is our best answer because passage 1 is setting up the fact that unique ecosystems can develop in urban parks, and then passage 2 is giving us a real example of that. Thanks so much for doing those sample problems with me. I hope that was helpful. If you're wanting to do any more test prep for the Praxis exam, you can check out our other videos here, or you can head over to study.com where you'll find a ton more review material, including lots of sample problems, like hundreds of sample problems, as well as specialized teaching based on specific concepts you might want to review, and strategy to help you with the big test day. So in the meantime, we'd love to hear from you. Please go ahead and like and subscribe if you found this video helpful. And you can always drop us a comment to let us know about other topics you'd like us to review, other videos you'd like us to make. All right, thanks again for tuning in, and good luck with the studying.